Hi, my name is Melissa and I'm going to tell you why you should read A Game of Thrones. If you don't know what A Game of Thrones is, it's actually the first book in a series by George R.R. Martin, and the series is called A Song of Fire and Ice. Now, if you've ever seen the book, it's pretty plain looking, it's not much to it, it's very lackluster. It would never be a book that I would actually look at and be like, oh my gosh, I need to read it. Not to mention, it's wrote by this guy right here. And it's over 800 pages. Yeah, not my first pick. But after reading a couple pages, I definitely realized that I should read it, so therefore I'm spreading the news. Now, if you don't know about A Game of Thrones, the TV series, the one thing that you should know is it's the #1 TV series that was pirated last year, according to BBC. So that should definitely tell you something. In the book, there are several houses that are vying for the Iron Throne. That's the Iron Throne right there. And that's why the name is called A Game of Thrones, because it's obviously a game of trying to get this throne. There are 4 main houses: the Starks, Baratheons, Lannisters, and Targaryens. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one. Now, the first house is the Starks, and those are the main narrators to the story. They're from the north, and they're from a castle called Winterfell. The Starks consist of Ned, which is the father, Catelyn, who's the mother. Then you've got Sansa, Robb, Rickon, Bran, Arya, and then Ned's bastard son, Jon. Their sigil happens to be a direwolf, which is kind of like a regular wolf but larger. And there's a lot of symbolism having to do with a wolf and loyalty, which comes about during the story, because the Starks are very loyal people and they believe in honor. Now, the next house is the Baratheons, and they're from the Western Hills and Valleys, and they consist of Robert, his wife Cersei, and their children Tommen, Marjorie, and Joffrey. And as you can see, their sigil is a stag, which from symbols.com happens to be a quest of a hero in symbolism, which is kind of the starting point as to how this all happens, which I'll explain a little bit later. Now, the next house happens to be the Lannisters, which Robert's wife, Cersei, actually comes from the Lannisters. She also has 2 brothers, Tyrion and Jaime. And as you can see, the Lannisters have a symbol called the lion, which is very reflective of the type of people they are, because they're very prideful people. The last house, which happens to be the house before the Baratheons that ruled the kingdom for 300 years, is the Targaryens. And that's Daenerys and Viserys. And their symbol's the dragons, which you'll come to learn a little bit about them. Now, the beginning of the story, which is pretty much what captured me, was you find Robert Baratheon, who is the ruling king of the Iron Throne right now, and he is coming to visit his friend Ned Stark, who they were raised together when they were younger, so they're kind of like brothers. And he has come to Ned asking him to be the Hand of the King. And the Hand of the King is basically the person that does all the dirty work. Now, at the same time that he's asking Ned to do that, his wife, Catelyn, gets a letter from her sister stating that her husband, Jon Arryn, who was the previous King's Hand, died under mysterious circumstances. And they think that Cersei, who is his wife, was behind it. Now, amidst all this, their youngest son, Bran, is climbing up a wall, because that's just what he does. And he happens to peek in a window and see Cersei Baratheon at this point, and Jaime Lannister, which happened to be brother and sister, getting a little too close for comfort. And when Jaime realizes this, he pushes Bran out of the window to where Bran falls on the ground and becomes into a coma. Now, as the days pass, there's actually a murder attempt on Bran, which furthers the story along. And within the story, we see a lot of good versus evil. You see the Lannisters versus the Starks, obviously, having to deal with the whole Bran thing, and Cersei against Ned, because Cersei is in her husband's ear and Ned's the king's hand, trying to keep the king grounded. You have a lot of Ned versus Robert, which of course comes from, again, Cersei in his ear and Ned trying to be very grounded with the king and trying to guide him to be a better king. You have Daenerys and Viserys, the brother and sister from the Targaryen house. Viserys really wants power, and Daenerys really wants just to live her life. She wants to fall in love, and if she wants to rule the kingdom, she wants to rule it well. And then you have Tyrion versus the Lannisters, and Tyrion is actually a gimp, so he's a lot smaller, he waddles, and he's kind of looked down upon by the Lannisters because they're all about their pride. So a lot of times he gets the crabby end of the stick when it comes to their family. There's a lot of double crosses and deceptions. We learned that the knife used on Bran's attempted murder is actually Tyrion's, who is the imp in the Lannister house. And then later on, Ned gets double-crossed several times. And one happens to be a confidant who is trying to help him right the wrongs when the house becomes kind of disruptive and the throne kind of goes up in the air. And he also gets double-crossed by someone he's betrothed one of his daughters to. So there's a lot of double-crossing going on. There's also very much a supernatural element. There's the wall that Jon happens to be guarding, and we know a little bit about the wall and the fact that there's something bad out there, and that's why they guard it. And even Jon's uncle was out there doing his little rounds and he has disappeared. So we know there's something going on with the wall. There's something bad. There's a saying that's constantly coming up called "winter is coming," and a lot of people attribute it to being symbolic, as in bad things are coming, things like that. But in the books, George R.R. Martin actually explains that they've had summer for several years. I want to almost say 7 or 9 years. So they know winter is coming. And winter lasts just as long as the good weather. So they're going to be dealing with 9 to 7 years of winter, which in that time period is very rough, because you have to think about it. There's no electric. You're having to kill for your food. It's not the way it is now. And then there's dragons, which I don't want to say too much about that because that spoils a little bit of the excitement of it. But just realize that one of the houses has dragons. There's a lot of underdog characters in this book series as well. You're dealing with Arya, who is the youngest daughter of the Stark clan. And Arya is a girl who wants to be much more than that. And you see that in her wanting to train with the swords, which later come in handy in later books. Jon, who's the bastard son of Ned Stark, he's wanting to help his family with the ruling and things like that. And of course he's not, because he's considered the bastard. So he's left out a lot, but you see him wanting to help. And then you have Daenerys, who is wanting to be more than what her brother wants her to be, which I explained earlier. She's wanting to be the mother, she's wanting to be the queen, she's wanting to be something great. She's not all about the power. And one good example of this is during a raid with the Dothraki, she actually saves a lot of the maidens from